Episode 5. TA with circumflex YKT. HA with grave MT. Qing DNG. The triumphant return after months of retreat through rain, mud, smoke, and fire. Viet finally began to see the moment that Trần Hưng Đạo had been waiting for all along. It was not an opportunity that appeared suddenly. It had been created through every patient withdrawal, every hidden storehouse of rice, every destroyed road, every desperate delaying battle, and every day the Yuan army was forced deeper into a land that refused to surrender. The summer of 1285 settled over northern Viet with a suffocating heat that the northern invaders had never truly endured before. Burned rice fields stretched beneath heavy skies thick with moisture. Endless rivers and swamps trapped the Mongol cavalry in terrain that could not be conquered like the wide grasslands of the steppe. Disease, hunger, unfamiliar weather, and constant guerrilla attacks slowly began to grind down the army that had once been considered unstoppable. Inside the Yuan camps, the pride of the early invasion started to disappear. Warhorses grew thinner every day. Supply parties vanished in forests or were ambushed beside riverbanks. At night, warning horns echoed from different directions, preventing soldiers from sleeping in peace. The invaders slowly realized they had been dragged into a war unlike any they had fought before. On the side of Viet, the hidden fires of resistance were beginning to rise. Along the river villages, scattered units secretly regrouped. War boats hidden in reeds were repaired under cover of darkness. Spears and blades were sharpened beneath torchlight. The princes and commanders of the Trần dynasty quietly received orders to move. Everything was preparing for the moment that would change the fate of the war. Standing before a battlefield map illuminated by firelight, Trần Hưng Đạo finally spoke the words his generals had waited months to hear. The moment has come. Those words spread through the camps like thunder before a storm. No longer would Viet simply retreat to preserve its strength. No longer would it rely only on small ambushes to delay the enemy. The nation was about to transform from endurance into full counterattack. And the first target would be Hàm Tử. Hàm Tử stood beside a major river route where the Yuan forces controlled an important strategic position protecting their supply lines. If this place could be broken, the road toward counterattack would open. Prince Trần Not Do It was given command of the battle. He understood that defeating the Yuan army required more than strength. The enemy had to be thrown into confusion before the killing blow arrived. Viet war boats moved silently through the morning fog. The sound of the oars nearly disappeared beneath the water itself. Along the riverbanks, hidden troops waited inside tall reeds and dense forests. When the Yuan soldiers began to relax beneath the crushing heat of summer, the attack exploded without warning. War drums thundered from every direction. Flaming arrows ripped through the mist and crashed into enemy camps. Small Viet war boats surged forward like shadows across the river. Cries of sat that shook the water itself. The Yuan army fell into chaos beneath the speed and fury of the assault. Trần Not Do It personally led the main strike, driving the enemy into confusion before delivering the decisive attack. An enemy general was captured alive in the middle of the battle. This was more than a military victory. It was the first true sign that the balance of war had begun to turn. News of victory at Hàm Tử spread like fire across the land. Villagers who had once fled their homes now looked at one another with different eyes. Soldiers of Viet felt strength returning to their hearts. The invaders were no longer invincible ghosts. They could be defeated, and Viet had just proven it. Yet Trần Hưng Đạo understood that one victory would not end the war. To reclaim Thăng Long, Chương Dương had to fall. Chương Dương was the critical river gateway leading back toward the capital. The Yuan army had heavily fortified the area with both naval and land forces to secure their supplies and protect their retreat. If Hàm Tử had been the first stab, Chương Dương would become the great slash that opened the battlefield completely. Trần Quang Khai was chosen to command the operation. He gathered forces from many directions, coordinating them carefully under the strategy designed by Supreme Commander Trần Quoc Tuan. This was no longer a series of scattered raids. This was a massive national counteroffensive. At dawn on the day of battle, the river at Chương Dương disappeared beneath heavy fog. Viet war boats hid silently within the white mist like spirits waiting for the perfect moment. Then suddenly the drums erupted. Warboats burst from the fog in every direction. Flaming arrows filled the sky. Đại Việt soldiers stormed the riverbanks with roaring battle cries. Tran Quang Khai led the assault directly into the heart of the Yuan defenses. The invaders fought fiercely, but months of exhaustion had weakened them badly. Wooden bridges burned. Enemy warships sank beneath rivers glowing red with fire. Retreating soldiers trampled each other in panic. The clash of weapons, the crash of water against ships, and the roar of soldiers merged into a storm of victory that shattered the Yuan lines completely. By the time the sun rose high, Chuangjung belonged to Đại Việt once again. The final road back to Thăng Long had been opened. But in the south, another danger still remained. The army of Toa Đô marching north from Kampa remained a deadly threat capable of joining forces with Thot Hone if it were not destroyed quickly. Trần Hưng Đạo understood that the war could not end until this army was crushed, and the battlefield chosen for that final blow was Tây Kết. Tây Kết became the place where everything Đại Việt had endured during the war came together. The patience of retreat, the persistence of guerrilla warfare, the burning spirit of Sathat, and the strategic brilliance of Trần Hưng Đạo himself. He did not rush immediately into a direct confrontation. Instead, he drew the enemy deeper into a fragmented battlefield, making them believe that Đại Việt remained weak and desperate. But this was only the final illusion before the true storm arrived. When Toa Đô's forces advanced deeper into Tây Kết, the armies of Đại Việt suddenly closed every escape route. From the rivers, from the forests, from the reeds beside the fields, Tran forces appeared like rising waves. War drums shook the sky. Red banners flew through smoke and fire. The Yuan army was attacked from every direction at once. Their formations collapsed rapidly into panic. Toa Đô attempted to rally his men, but every road had already been sealed. The warriors of Đại Việt were no longer fighting with fear inside them. They fought with the fury of lost homes, with memories of hungry retreats, and with the oath that their nation would never bow to invaders. The Battle of Tây Kết became the final hammer blow that shattered the Yuan dream of conquering Đại Việt. Toa Đô's army was devastated. Toa Đô himself died on the battlefield. News of disaster reached Thot Hone like cold knives cutting away his final hopes. The prince who had once dreamed of conquering Đại Việt now thought only of survival. The retreat began. Broken Yuan soldiers abandoned weapons and struggled northward in desperation. Đại Việt forces pursued relentlessly. Poisoned arrows flew across forests and riverbanks like the vengeance of the invaded land itself. In absolute panic, Thot Hone was forced to hide inside a large copper tube while escaping across the border to protect himself from poisoned arrows. The image became a symbol of the humiliating collapse of the army that had once terrified much of Eurasia. The war had completely reversed. From the dark days when the capital had been abandoned, Đại Việt now entered its triumphant return. Victorious armies marched toward Thăng Long beneath the cheers of the people. Roads once scarred by invading cavalry now filled with banners of victory. Families returned to the capital. Kitchen fires burned again inside homes. Children's voices echoed through streets that had once fallen silent beneath occupation. The Tran court returned to Thăng Long in an explosion of joy shared by the entire nation. This was not only the victory of a dynasty. It was the victory of a people who refused to surrender. Tran Quang Khai recited his poem, Tung Gia Hon Kin Su, as a declaration that Đại Việt had survived the greatest storm of its age. And inside the reborn capital, the people finally understood that the painful retreat of the past had never been weakness at all. It was that sacred retreat which had led Đại Việt to this glorious day of triumph.